Clarity of Vision, where Warren Rustand will share ways to gain clarity on your vision during this crisis to continue the momentum of your life. Well, so many familiar faces here today. Many of us are EO Leadership Academy graduates. Shout out to Jamie Duragi and Andrea Herrera and the EO Leadership Committee and the amazing leaders and all of us that have come together to level up our leadership in this crisis. Most of you have heard Warren introduced before. It goes something like this. Here's Warren. For those of you that haven't, Warren Rustand, former CEO of Providence Service Corporation, served as a member of board of directors for over 50 public, private, and non-for-profit companies. Warren served as appointment secretary to President Ford, global chairman of WPO, co-founder and dean of faculty at EO's Leadership Academy. Countless awards, Sport Hall of Fame, White House Fellow, but the award he treasures the most is Father of the Year in his hometown of Tucson, Arizona. This is a conversation. Please post your questions. We won't get to all the questions today, but they'll be addressed in future episodes. This live stream will live on this Facebook page as well as future episodes, so you can continue the conversation with Warren and each other. Thank you all for being here. We are all in this together. Here's Warren.
Thank you, Winnie. I really appreciate it. And we appreciate technology, except when it doesn't work as well as we wanted. So we were delayed a bit because of the technology today, but we want to thank you for being with us in this conversation. And in the hallmark of a conversation, we want it to be a dialogue, not a monologue. And so we appreciate your questions, your comments, your thoughts. Last week, we talked about, in the first episode, we talked about the crisis we're in. Begin refocusing our mind. Today, we're going to talk about that mind and how it's going to work. And that's the notion of clarity of vision, the first great principle of leadership, that everything else flows from clarity of vision. And that if we can get that right, then we have an opportunity to be remarkably successful. So this conversation is about that. And it's about using tools and principles in the crisis itself that will allow us to handle the crisis more successfully and then move through the crisis and emerge in a much better position to be successful going forward in all four areas of our life: family, business, community, and self. This is really that preparation. I had a learning experience in preparation years ago working for then Vice President Gerald Ford. He was working for a president, and there were allegations against this president of conspiracy and engaging in a felony cover-up. The Supreme Court of the United States was going to render its decision, which it did on August 6, 1974. And it indicated that the President of the United States, then Richard Nixon, had indeed been involved in allegations of a cover-up, and that he would have one of two choices, it appeared: either resign or be impeached. At that moment in time, when these words were spoken to then Vice President Gerald Ford, Mr. Vice President, be prepared to be president. At that moment in time, the mantle of leadership was shifting to a man who had not prepared nor sought that office. I didn't know if he had really thought about the future, if he'd really had a clear vision about what could happen if he became the president. But without hesitation, he turned and asked to have the six names he was about to give in a room the next morning for a transition team meeting. He had not only thought about it, he knew the six people by name who would be closest to him as president. The next morning when the transition team met, the question was then, had he really thought about being president? Did he have a plan? Did he have a vision? Did he have clarity? And at that moment in time, he started to speak. And it was clear not only that he had thought about it and had a plan, but he had clarity around being president in the presidency, and he had clarity around his vision for America, at which time the country was suffering from high inflation rates, high unemployment, high interest rates. And if you look back on his 3.5 years as president, it was remarkably successful. And so I learned an important lesson, that clarity of vision and preparation for that vision really matters and makes a difference. Can we think of any other leaders that we would suggest maybe had clarity as well? One I've studied a lot, Nelson Mandela. He went from prisoner to presidency. An amazing transformation for an individual during the time he was imprisoned. We think of others. Gandhi, who as a young lawyer wanted to protest the rising salt prices in his native India. And so he started marching for 247 miles, and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people joined him on the march. But he changed the economic circumstance in India, and he in fact led the way for making Great Britain an exit from India as the ruling power. Mother Teresa, who as a young nun thought, wouldn't it be great if there were outposts of nuns around the world for love and generosity and serving members of the church and members of the community? So her vision, clearly defined and spoken, led to a system of cottage industry nuns who are around the world who really help people. So she had great social impact. And finally, Winston Churchill, who during the bombing in the Second World War, the bombing of London, really went into his bunker every night and went on the radio and inspired and motivated his people. Never give up hope. Stay the course. We'll be okay. And rallied and motivated and inspired an entire population to sustain them during the war. Each of these people had clear vision. Each of them understood the importance of that vision. So as we think about a first step in going forward, what would that be? To get your own clarity, to define your vision for emerging from this great event that we have going on around the world. The first is to find time and space to actually address the issue. And I know that's really hard right now because we've got kids all over. We're confined to our homes. We're shelter in place. There's a demand for us not to go out. And that's almost universal across the whole world. And so what do we do in that situation? Well, we're trying to find some space. It may be a room for a few hours. It may be out in the backyard. It may be on the front yard. It may be on a balcony. It may be sitting in your car, but find a quiet, serene place where you can really focus on the current crisis and your future vision and get clarity of vision in the process. That's most important. Ponder, think deeply, make notes. Where it is murky, think deeper about it. Get that clarity. Over my shoulder, you'll see a bronze. Last week, I used a different bronze, but if you look at this bronze over my shoulder, it's a Native American riding down a mountain. Oftentimes in Native American cultures and tribes, the chief would convene his elders and they would speak together, and then the chief would go off by himself to find that piece of serenity, that peaceful understanding of who he is and what he was about to do for the big issues. And this is a bronze statue of a chief coming down from the mountain. The title of the piece is Down from the Stronghold. The notion that he would disappear and go away for a period of time to find that clarity of vision in the big decisions that he was making for his tribe. So as we think about the first step is absolutely finding peace and quiet and serenity, time and space to find our vision. The second step is really about the deep work that we have to do, and that's true of all of us at different times in our lives. And when a crisis like this happens at the end of a decade of growth and economic prosperity, it challenges us to our very core. It's important that we do the deep work. Who are we? What do we want? Where do we want to go? With whom are we going to be traveling? It talks and speaks to our core values and beliefs, and it challenges us in unique ways. And I've had conversations over the last 45 days with people who are being challenged to their very core, whose families are at risk, whose businesses are at risk, whose very communities are threatened by what's going on. But if we don't change ourselves, we can't change our circumstances. We can't change our environment. The deep work starts with us. And we have to really define ourselves in a new way. And the crisis will change things for all time. There will be a percentage of the population that as a result of this crisis will never act in the same way. So your clarity of vision has to be about what we will look like when we come out the other side. And therefore, what are the opportunities for our families, for our businesses, for our communities that will look different and feel different than it is today. So as we think about all of that, it reminds me of an EO-YPO leader that many of you know. His name is Mark Russo. He is a spec home and custom home builder in Seattle, Washington. He built a really great company. Prior to 2008, it was a terrific company doing about $50 million in revenue. And he and his partner, Jay Messatrano, really had figured out how to run a great home building business. But the surprise of 2008 is like the surprise of 2020. It came upon us so suddenly, and all of a sudden, within months, their entire company disappeared. They lost everything, all employees. They lost their corporate offices. They were operating out of the basement of their homes. Their very homes were being threatened with eviction. They had, in fact, lost it all and still owed several $million to the banks. When I first met him, he talked about that with some considerable emotion. It was a very difficult time for him. But as we begin to talk about this principle of getting clarity of vision, I asked him, what is it you want to be and do? What's your future look like in your mind? And he could clearly identify that. I want to rebuild a great company. I want to be a better husband and father. I want to be a better corporate leader. I want to build a culture that people love to work in. I want to build a successful company again. It was clear to him what he wanted. Fast forward to 2020, January 1st, what did that look like? A company that was larger than the one he had lost, $70 million in revenue. He's become a great father, a great husband, a better leader in his business, built a great culture, won national honors, regional honors, and awards for the kind of company and the place to work. You see, he had a clear vision of where he was going. He knew what it was he wanted to achieve. And once he got that clear, it was easy for him. The key element of that is discipline. Once we take the time and space, discipline time, to figure out where we're going, and we take the time to do the deep work, all the overlay of that is discipline. We have to have it. Now, the third step, once you know where you're going, is to focus on that task, that goal, that objective. To be sure that you eliminate all the clouds around it, eliminate uncertainty as much as you can. And there's no perfect vision. There are some things that will evolve and develop as we move toward that vision. And visions are both large and small. It might be, how do I get my family through this week? What's my vision for that? How clear is that? How is it that I can save my business during this crisis, COVID-19? What is it I can do to support my community? It can be large or small, or it could be the company you're going to create when all this is done. You know, we had a young man that came to us when he was 12 years old to live with our family. He's a Native American. He was with the Navajo tribe. And he came to us because his parents wanted him a better situation. And so they actually wanted him to have a better education. And so he lived with us from 12 to 23. And oftentimes in his teens, I would ask him, what is it you want to be? And it was clear in his mind, I want to return to my native roots. I want to preserve my native language. I want to learn the skill of my mother, which is weaving tapestries and rugs. I want to be a credit to my tribe. And so he left and he built a small hogan near his mother's home, dirt floor, kerosene lantern, a loom in the corner where he could actually do his weaving. His mother, who was suffering from diabetes, would ultimately die of that disease, but he would wheel her over in the wheelchair and she would teach him how to do this. And over time, she had both legs amputated. She recovered from those amputations in our home in Tucson, Arizona. She was one of the great weavers in Navajo history. And so too, William has become the great weaver. If you ever want to see his tapestries, you can go to his website, William Whitehair Weaver, and see what he has learned to create. So he's become a leader in his own right. He's an amazing young man. He learned that vision through discipline and cultivation of his best and deepest thoughts in quiet times. I have a lot of friends who mountain climb, and many years ago I had a chance to talk to different ones. I asked the first, what are you going to do over the next 20, 25, 30 years? And he said, climb mountains. I asked the second, what are you going to do? And he said, I'm going to climb the 7 summits on the 7 continents, I hope. And I asked the third, who had early in his teens become a mountain climber with his father and wanted to face his dream and his vision, which was to climb Mount Everest. And he was able to help others get prepared for Mount Everest, but he was never quite good enough to find a place on the team. But he would prepare their ropes and their packs and their food and everything else and help them get on their way. And finally, one day, someone had injured or got sick and couldn't qualify for the team any longer, and they offered this young man the chance to go. And so at 21 years of age, Jamie Clark from Calgary, Canada, in fact, climbed Mount Everest. He climbed it again a few years later. But because he had a vision of going and because he was purposeful and dedicated in that pursuit, he was able to achieve his dream. Well, I think we have to appreciate in this crisis that suffering is universal. Our response to it is individual. And to those of you who are struggling and suffering and hurting today, let me assure you This will change. There will be a better time. You will make it because of the quality of your lives and the purity of your heart. You'll make it through, however tough, because that's what we do as entrepreneurs. And we will be out there battling again another day. But the ability to create that vision is really the difference in how successful we'll be once we're through the crisis. I invite you to begin the work. Take time and space, deep work, deep thought, and then focus on the task at hand, and you will be okay. So let's turn some time back to Winnie so we can answer your questions. Let's think about creating that vision for our future. I'm doing that hard work right now. I hope you are too. Winnie?
Thank you, Warren. So a couple of questions here. Thank you, everyone. Please post your questions in the chat. The first one is from Krista McLean. She is here to the last one and helping people see your words visually. What would be one visual that she could add that would complement clarity of vision?
Oh, the one visual I think that would be important is the solitude that it takes. It's the person sitting on the mountaintop. It's the person sitting at the beach. It's the person, in this case, maybe confined to their home, but it's finding the solitude and the peace and the serenity that we need to think deeply and broadly about where we're going. So I would think that would be the piece that would be important.
Thank you, Warren. So I've heard you say before, do you see life as scarcity or abundance? And I'm talking about the glass half full or half empty. And that goes back to a question that Marcia Rawls has. And she's saying, how can we support others who can't get clarity due to negativity and feeling down?
Yeah, I think that's really difficult in a crisis like this because so many people are so troubled by what's going on. And as we talked about last week, there is fear, self-doubt, insecurity, panic, anger, frustration. Those are emotions. And paying attention to mental health during this period of time is really critical. We've been in the mental health business for many years and understand the importance of it, and it's linked directly to physical health as well. And so I would suggest to you that continuously be positive around those who tend to be negative. Try to show them a better path, a better way. Try to help them with some tools to think differently about this, because ideally, we'd all like to be in a position of abundance all the time, thinking positively, thinking in a growth way. But the reality of it is that in all of our lives at different times, we think of it in a scarcity way. And this notion of, is the glass half full or half empty? And I always approach that in a humorous way. When somebody tells me their glass is half empty, I always say, you need to get a smaller glass. So the same volume put in a smaller glass will make that glass half full. The whole notion is that we can change our attitude. We can change our focus. Sometimes we need other leaders to help us do that. And I think it's a learned process. So Marcia, I think that's tough. Marcia's been a great friend for many years, as Kristen McLean. And you all are so positive. Both of you are so forceful in the things that you do for EO and the world and your community. It's amazing. But take your abundance and share it with others in subtle and soft ways, not in critical ways, and see you can't help them change.
Wonderful, thank you. This is a question from PJ Bradley. Who are the leaders you have worked with who have best rebounded from hardships like this and raised others up with them?
Yeah, I think there are actually a lot of them who've rebounded from very difficult times, right? Very harsh times. And so I think about that. There are actually quite a few leaders who have done that. I know that I worked with a leader in our business who had an automobile accident, lost his wife and his children. He felt guilty as a survivor. He felt he shouldn't have survived. He had difficulty getting back to work. But as we talked about these very principles and as we talked about the opportunity for him to regain his footing, and it took him months to do that, he ultimately did and became an extraordinary leader. And it was the very calamity and catastrophe that he had experienced that made him that great leader, because he became enormously empathetic with other people in the environment and sympathetic to their plights, and was really remarkable in that sense. So and I would not name him, it might embarrass him, but I think, he overcame a lot to be that leader. I think in our own lives, we can think of people who have overcome a lot, right? I got to work a bit with General Colin Powell. He was also a White House fellow. He was born a poor kid in Brooklyn. He was just one of the guys. And he was trying to figure out how he could overcome the poverty in which he was blessed to enjoy as a young man, the uncertainty. He had good parents who wanted good things for him. He was a good guy. And so he turned to the military to do that and had a 37-year career in the military, ever increasing to the point where he was elected chairman or selected as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. During that entire time, he overcame prejudice, he overcame scorn and ridicule, he overcame a host of things, racial injustice, but he became a great leader. And if you haven't read his book, Powell's Principles, I would recommend it to you. It's an outstanding book.
Thank you, Warren. I know how much your family means to you, and you have a few, I think, few family members. And this is a question that relates to family, and it's from Jody Evelyn Mann. What do you suggest is the best way to talk to your kids about this?
Good question, Jody. Jody's a great friend, and her husband, Dave, terrific family. Their daughters, Ellie and Lauren. Love them all, and thank you for the question. Jody, I think that's a really important judgment for parents to make. It's important, it has to be age appropriate. Whatever we talk to our children about. With young children, we don't want to put fear in their hearts. We don't want to scare them. With older children, we want to have them recognize that this happens and the seriousness of it and the impact maybe even that it's going to have on our family, and they become partners in our quest to get through this together. And Lauren and Ellie certainly are of that ilk. They can understand what's going on. The critical thing is that we don't induce fear, that we don't get them to panic, that we don't get them to be overly concerned, because we need them to be healthy emotionally during this process, even though we're going to struggle with this in different ways, all of us. In some cases, we're just struggling for our family. So what we've done is, as I try to find the seriousness of the crisis and then define what I would do with our family, the three words that I suggested last week for our family. First, protection. What are we going to do to protect our family? Listen to the guidelines given to us by a government, scientists, and medicine. Listen carefully and then do what they ask. The second is security. How do we provide security, food, shelter, the other necessities during a time of great crisis when we can't or aren't supposed to be leaving our homes except for essential travel? And the third is, how during this crisis will our family organize itself and discipline itself to live happily and successfully while so much of the world is going through this great challenge, and as we are too. So that's how I'd answer your question. And I hope that's sufficient, Jody, and I hope you and the family are well.
Thank you, Jody. Warren, this is actually a question for all of us that are here today with you from the Global and Regional Leadership Academies. And one of the things you taught us was about journaling. And, this is a momentous time to be writing about what should we be thinking about when we're writing in our journals.
Well, I think really importantly, this is part of the disciplinary process that we have to be successful going through crisis. So we talked about the 10, 10, and 10 last week, right? Which is showing signs of gratitude every morning for about 10 minutes and then reading inspirational thought for 10 minutes. And the third piece is journaling. And the third piece is really important because it's cathartic. It's this notion that we will put pen to paper in our own handwriting, not word process, but put pen to paper and really write our thoughts as we go through this. This becomes our history, our genealogy, our legacy that we leave for our family over time. And long after we're gone, they will be able to read about the coronavirus, COVID-19, its impact on the world, its impact on us, and how we got through that in a successful way with our family. And so journaling is a way to clear the mind and purge the soul with those great and deep thoughts that we want to leave as a record of what happened during this time. I think that's very beneficial to us and very helpful to us.
Thank you. So this is from Ashal Bhatia. You know Ashal with Quran. How should we have conversations around what if the leaders get the coronavirus, and how do we bring that up with our teams? What if we get it? How do we bring it up with our teams?
Well, I think that it, first of all, is to be honest and truthful in communication. And that is, if they've been exposed to their teams, the teams need to know this to take prevention and be tested themselves. As I mentioned last week, we have a CEO of one of our companies is his mother has it, his sister has it, and his her husband has it, his brother-in-law, and so he's been exposed, and so it's necessary to make sure that the team knows about it, talk about it openly, be sure they have good sources of information, try to keep people from panicking by believing everything they hear from different people or different sources. Find one or two or three really good scientific and medical sources where you can get good data and information, and then trust that data and information and use that to make data-based decisions. I think if you do that, you're going to be helpful, but always share openly, transparently, and honestly that which you know with your teams, even if one of our leaders gets coronavirus. And we're seeing that right now where the Prime Minister of the UK, Boris Johnson, was just moved from his home to the hospital, now to ICU, just in the last few hours. And so it's important that if that happens in our teams, that we're talking about that very openly, and we help solutions, potential solutions to help our teams.
Warren, this is from Alex Yastrovenitsky. Hello, Warren. You and I discussed creating compelling, vivid vision for our team for 6 to 9 months from now. What do you think are the important areas to include when defining a vision? Being an engineer, I see a vision as a combination of so many areas, such as team culture, relationships with clients, innovations, etc.
I think there are all of those things, Alex. It's good to hear from you. I enjoyed our conversation last week. Thank you. I think we have to include all of those, but we have to establish a priority. They're not all of equal importance as you go forward. Really deal with the basics. First of all, it's about the individuals, and it's about the team, and it's about your colleagues. That's the first order of magnitude. The second order of magnitude, it seems to me, and the priorities are really about your business and the core business issues that you're going to be addressing, and how those are going to be important to address in a way that allows you to successfully get through the crisis and emerge healthier than you were during the crisis. And then I think beyond that, you can begin to plan for new and different and better opportunities that you may see as a result of the new normal. I suspect, for example, and I could be 100% wrong. My wife always assures me that I'm 100% wrong. So I know it happens a lot. So I think in this situation, I think there are going to be patterns and habits that are going to be changed for all time by a certain percentage of populations in certain countries. For example, I think there are some students who will never return to school. They will be online, homeschooled from this point forward. I think also there are workers who have always reported to corporate offices or big buildings who have now been working from home online, who are going to discover that they can be just as efficient and effective there as they can be commuting to or going to a workspace every day. And so I think we're going to have a larger percentage of our workforce at home. I think, we've had about, in the United States at least, we have about 26 to 27% of all purchases are made online. I think that we're going to have 60, 70, 80% of purchases made online going forward, from groceries to other goods, to opportunities, to things that we might need that are incidental to our core life. So I think we're going to see some patterns of change, and we have to be embracing that, thinking about that, and urging our colleagues and our teams to begin to think about that regardless of our business, so that we will be ready for the new world order, which I think would be pretty profound and significant. I think we're going to come back slowly from this. I'm not persuaded at least, that there's going to be this V-shaped curve with this big spike and the economy is going to be ratcheting it up. That didn't happen in 2008 and 9. It hasn't happened in most other downturns. So it'll be interesting to see. Pure speculation on my part. As I said, my wife thinks I'm often wrong.
All right, Warren, a closing question. What are the specific techniques to gain clarity of vision?
Well, the three that I mentioned today, which I think are very important. The first notion, of course, is that we have to think about is just how do I create in a confined environment the space that I need to really think about this stuff. That's hard, and that's often negotiated with your spouse, with your children, with your significant other. It's just to create some space where you can do deep thinking. The second is be willing to do the deep work. This is a chance to transform yourself. This is a chance to change you, right? So let's think about, how would I be a better leader? How could I be a better husband or mother? How could I be a better child or parent? What can I do to make myself better? You know, we're rediscovering family being together. We're riding bikes and recreating and playing games in the house. We're doing stuff we haven't done for years, maybe ever, in connecting as a family. What do we want to sustain out of that? What really makes sense? And then how are we communicating with our colleagues during this period of time, our team leaders, our businesses? How is that working? And how do we want to change that going forward? This is a time of personal transformation, personal change, an ability to really look at our lives in a different way. And then the third thing is, once you make choices among those many decisions I just mentioned, stay disciplined and focused and on task to get it done. If you do those three things, I bet you'll call me or send me, you know what, I applied those and I have emerged from this mess, this coronavirus disaster, in a much healthier and better way. And it made my journey through the crisis easier.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you for this amazing gift of you and sharing your thoughts with us, your passion, your compassion, and more than anything, bringing us together. You know, you brought us together in many different places, and bringing us together during this time of crisis means the world to us. So thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. I look forward to being with you on Thursday in the morning, about 8:30 a.m., 9 a.m., which will be Pacific Daylight Time. And we're going to be talking about the second great principle of leadership. Once you focus on vision, it's the certainty of intention. And it's what about intentionality is going to make the difference for you. So we'll see you then. Thanks a lot.